Wow, there's gonna be so many amazing fun things to do at Rocky Mountain Furcon. I can't wait to go. When was it again? Oh. Wasn't that when the Mayans blew up the world? It's been a decade now since the world ended with the release of Roland Emmerich's terrible movie 2012, so I thought it'd be fun to look back at an old convention manual that was back in 2012. It's Rocky Mountain Furcon in Colorado. This convention is still ongoing, but this is a fun time capsule. I have some things to say on this one, and I'll add my comments afterwards, but for now, let's take a trip back in time and check out what happened at this convention. that was an interesting look at what the world of furry was like 10 years ago. What jumped out to you? Well, the first thing that jumped out to me was these ads here for other conventions. Megaplex 2013's special guest was Fox and More, an up-and-coming musician at the time, and I actually have his album, Come Find Me, which came out 2 years later, so he was kind of, on the rise. We'll talk about that album in a later video. The panel list is pretty run-of-the-mill for a furcon. You've got your, fursuit making 101, first time at a furrycon tips, animation and movie screenings, but the one that jumped out to me was this poker tournament. I had never heard of a fursuit poker tournament, but now I must see and participate in one. This sounds amazing. I grew up going to Las Vegas, so I'm quite familiar with poker and card games. I used to play poker with my grandma all the time, and this would be pretty fun. I like this ad for a fursuit. I think it's kind of hysterical with Sable here, kind of just like reaching out to, hug or leap. It's great. But the fursuit here is pretty modern. I point that out because in an earlier video, I looked at a vintage fursuit. So it's interesting that by 2012, we really started to see fursuits come into their own and get that more cartoon modern style we see today. I thought this ad for another fur convention was funny because it's also using an apocalyptic end-of-the-world theme. How much you want to bet every convention used that theme for 2012? I was a dumb 12-year-old kid. I was actually a little worried the world might end due to some event. As much as I applaud the inclusion of these stories, and they're very intricate stories, you can pause and read them earlier in the video if you want to check them out, they're pretty long-winded, and they didn't even include the full story. If you see that QR code there, you have to scan that to get the rest of the story. I would be pretty frustrated if I was a hotel guest, reading this in my room the night before, which is what these stories are supposed to do. They're supposed to kind of tide you over before the con, and I didn't get the full story unless I had a phone to scan that with. 2012 was kind of a turning point where a lot of people like myself were just starting to get cell phones, and many of them didn't have QR code readers or scanners. I can remember in 2013 or 14, I got my first phone, but it couldn't scan things, so I couldn't scan any QR codes. That's kind of representative of this whole era, 2012, 13, 14. Smartphones were just beginning to catch on, and social media as a whole still really hadn't. It would be like 2015, 16 would we see kind of the widespread adoption of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You might have noticed throughout the whole book that there are no Twitter or Instagram handles. There's no @ for any of the artists. Instead, it has the artist's website listed in full. That's a very old practice. Now things have become very modernized. You just kind of do an @ with a handle, and you can presume that that's the person's YouTube, Instagram, or whatever. But yeah, this is a pre-social media convention. So even though it was only 10 years ago, a lot has changed. I even noticed that, in the panels, there's not a lot of panels on photography or running social media or YouTube, which is kind of what most of these panels are at conventions now. I think social media has expanded fully tenfold, heck, maybe even 20, 50-fold if possible. It just made the community so much bigger and more well-known. So this whole book is kind of a time capsule into one of the last conventions that was pre-social media, before cell phones really caught on across the planet. So I guess in a strange way, as a analog for convention, analog as pre-social media was, this furrycon actually did represent an apocalypse of old and a rebirth of new. The 2020s are here now, and they bring in a fresh new decade of furry conventions. So I hope you enjoyed this travel back in time with me. Thanks for watching. This has been Austin's Animals, collecting all things furry.